Okay, we are at the top of the hour. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We'll maybe just go through a couple housekeeping notes before we get started, and then we'll jump into it. So, again, this is our discussion on climate smart forestry, carbon, and certified wood. We will set up a poll here shortly. I think we have a poll all set, and that is, here we go. And please share with us your background. We'd like to know your line of work, where you're coming from, what you do, and then also if you could put in the chat function where you are calling in from, that would be great. Perfect. Awesome. Okay, great. Very good. Thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate it. We will be recording today's webinar and we'll share a link following the event, and we'll also upload the recording to our YouTube page as well. You can see it there. Today we'll be using the poll and chat and Q&A functions. We'll use the chat functions to talk with other participants, the panelists, or to provide a general comment. If you have any issues, technical issues, we can address them in there as well. We would like you to use the Q&A to pose any questions to the panelists, and we will address those after our discussion in the Q&A portion of the event. And as I mentioned, please say hello in the chat box, and we will have closed captioning available. You can toggle and turn that off if you'd like as well, or actually perhaps let us know if you need that. Okay, and we're going to close the poll now as well. So thanks for participating. It looks like we have, oh, interesting. Hardy, you must be our only manufacturer on the line, and we do have some architects, engineers, and we also have a good chunk of other. So we will find out later, hopefully, what that is. You can enter that in the chat box as well. Very good. All righty. Okay, great. So my name is Annie Perkins, and I am Senior Director, Green Building and Supply Chain at Sustainable Forestry Initiative. Today, I am zooming in from the land of 10,000 lakes, which is also known as Minnesota. And at SFI, we envision a world that values and benefits from sustainably managed forests. And we work towards this by advancing sustainability through forest-focused collaborations. Most people know us through our standards. We have the forest management, fiber sourcing, and chain of custody standards. We also do extensive work in the areas of conservation impact, community engagement, and environmental education. That's what really sets us apart. Today's discussion, we're going to take a deep dive into the relationship between climate smart forestry, carbon sequestration and storage, and building with SFI certified wood products, particularly through the lens of mass timber. As you all know, the complex issues that are facing us globally really require solutions that offer multiple benefits, and that's precisely what SFI certified forests and wood products help to achieve. So today, our expert panelists will help connect the dots and illustrate for us how healthy working forests and certified forest products go beyond capturing and storing carbon. They spur rural economic development, improve biodiversity and water quality, and provide the restorative natural spaces that is truly a necessity for health and well-being for us all, particularly now more than ever. And when used in our built environment, wood products also help improve our day-to-day lives by providing the biophilic characteristics that we crave. And perhaps that helps in explaining the innate draw that we have towards them. And that is why I'm so thrilled to introduce today's panelists. Their combined expertise spans the gamut of forest health, climate smart cities, sustainable development, and the softening boundaries between our built and our natural environments. So how this will work today is, well, actually first, let me introduce our three panelists. Please help me welcome. We have Lauren Cooper, Director of the Forest, Carbon, and Climate Program within the Forestry Department at Michigan State University. Hello, Lauren. We have Jad Daley, President and CEO of American Forests. Hi, Jad. And we have Hardy Wentzel, CEO of Structurlam. Welcome. Very good. So how this will work today is just a casual conversation. We have 3 discussion questions, that I will ask one at a time, and our panelists will have a couple of minutes to answer those each, and then at the end, we'll open it up for Q&A. So we'll jump right into it. And the first discussion question that we have is, what role can certified and other responsibly managed forests and forest products like mass timber play in addressing carbon sequestration and storage and climate mitigation and resiliency? And Lauren, why don't we start with you if that's okay?
Sure, that sounds great. Well, good morning, probably good afternoon to everyone at this point. Maybe we have some West Coasters, but great to have the opportunity to speak with you all today. To kind of jump in, I'd probably start by framing it really broadly. So when we think about the role that certified and managed forests can play with our climate challenge that's facing us, I kind of started off with that it has to be sustainable. If it's not sustainable, if we're using wood products and they're not actually sustainable, then they're not actually part of a climate solution. And so that is a very fundamental kind of big component here, that there's a lot of benefits that we can consider in terms of the renewable aspects of timber products and wood products. But if we are not actually assuring and achieving that sustainability, then we're not going to be able to make the climate connection. And so I always kind of start off with that. So if wood is going to play a role, it truly must be sustainable. And we do need to be actively thinking even beyond some of our previous understanding of what sustainability is, to ensure that it's really climate smart, which is still a term that's being defined in some ways, and so to go into another point is that defining the sustainability piece can be a challenge. So and across the board. So if you're thinking in a global context, this can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. We're lucky in the part of the world that we're in, that we have fewer challenges in some ways. For example, in terms of transparency or land tenure. And so for us, that we can take a lot of confidence with the role of certification in providing the assurances that we're seeking, and that we can create a very confident story about the role of certified sustainable products in providing that climate benefit. But we do have to ensure, of course, that other values remain in place. So we have a lot of values for forests generally. And so we don't want to confuse the climate story so that we're adjusting our trade-offs on our forested lands too much. And I think certification actually can provide a safeguard for that. It provides the value on watersheds, biodiversity, other values on the landscape. So we don't want to overly dominate our forest narrative with just a carbon story. And so having that kind of balance, I think, is really crucial, and certification and a lot of the best practices that we already have in place about sustainability provide us the framework to do that. And then the final point is that when we look at the role that mass timber can play, this is actually super important and very exciting because of the long-term carbon storage in these products and these materials. And so there's some innovative technologies using different types of timber in new ways, smaller amounts, or what could have previously been considered waste material or recycled wood material. The newer technologies can open up both what we can do with this different types of wood and put it in long-term storage, but then also offer opportunities to substitute materials that are heavier emitters. So I know that's kind of the big story with the mass timber piece, is both the carbon and substitution. But that's kind of my outlook on that big question.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Lauren. Jad, how about you? You want to chime in?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Annie. I'm really grateful for the chance to be here today and to be with this community of people who are working so hard to make forest products a central part of Forest for Climate and of the climate solution. So I want to suggest that from our perspective at American Forests and my personal perspective, we really just need to think about forest carbon a little bit differently than maybe we have traditionally. That, in the past, if you think about when the discussion with forest carbon started and it was driven a lot by offset markets, it was kind of very crude, there was sort of improved forest management, avoided conversion, reforestation, afforestation. It was like boiling forestry down to this very oversimplified menu of options to get a positive carbon outcome. And I think we all know, as in the forest community, it's much more complicated than that. And so we really need to think about this in terms of carbon offense and carbon defense. You know, how do we rev up our forests to maximize the amount of carbon gains that we're able to create? And how do we deal with the increasing stresses on forests from climate change, which are becoming a bigger driver of loss of carbon from our forest carbon sink through things like mortality and wildfire? And so to get it right, to get that forestry equation right, for maximizing our resilient net carbon storage, we got to have that offense and defense mindset. And forest products are absolutely central to that, because whether you're thinking about improved forest management, where we're really optimizing our rotations and our mix of species, you know, for the maximum amount of carbon intake that we can get, or whether you're thinking about reducing, you know, the stress on forests, for example, in some cases, you know, with thinning and prescribed fire regimes. In all these instances, we're going to be generating material that's coming out of the forest as part of getting that right. And so what we do with it, optimizing those end uses across the diversity of forest products that we can create out of those outputs from our forest, is just everything in terms of getting the maximum carbon benefit that we can. And of course, as Lauren pointed out, if we do all those things, we get healthy forests, we get all the other things, wildlife habitat, water, and other things that we value so immensely out of our forests. So I mean, bottom line, climate smart forestry is going to demand, there's going to be more forestry in a climate, in a changing climate. It demands more forestry, more active forestry, more thoughtful and nuanced forestry than we've had in the past. And how we integrate forest products as part of that is just absolutely central to our success. So just as a, for example, our organization partnered with the U.S. Forest Service about a little over a year ago to publish a menu that, you know, takes that old super simplified, you know, 3 options for forest climate smart forestry and broadens it into more than 50 different actions that you can take, site specific, nuanced techniques that you can apply at different scales to get this climate positive outcome, carbon offense and carbon defense across the diverse types of forests and diverse settings that we're all operating within. So where does certification fit in? Well, certification is like the dream device for propagating that approach, right? And so the way that SFI in particular has leaned into integrating climate smart forestry into the standard going forward is a perfect example of the power of certification to take these kind of new ideas, new frame of reference for forestry and integrate it into how that's being done across millions and millions of acres, and give a certainty that best-in-class approach is what's being propagated on the landscape and ultimately producing these kind of climate-positive forest products that we need for the future.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks so much, Jad. Couldn't agree more. Great. Hardy, how about you? Last but not least. Are you there? You are muted.
There we go. Now I should be live. Yeah. Hey, good morning, and great comments there by Lauren and Jad. What I would just say is that you know, trees, they've always been with us. They're oxygen. They clean the air. They clean the water. You know, they provide us with warmth and shelter. So, you know, and I really believe now more than ever that they're clearly part of our future. And if you just look, like in my time in the industry, when I just look at what nature and man has dealt to forestry, just right here in North America, you know, I can go back to Mount St. Helens. I can remember Chernobyl. I can remember the spotted owl crisis in Oregon. I live in British Columbia, so I know all about the Clayoquot Sound old growth First Nations dispute that we had. But through that, I just also see, Jad, to your point about playing offense and defense with forestry, how we've just come through over those 4 decades of those significant events that I've mentioned, how we've come through every last one of them better and smarter, you know, and with more production, more volume of wood than we had when all of these things started. So I really think that today we know more than ever before about our forests. We know more than ever about, you know, the products that can be derived from forests, and like mass timber is one of them, and how it can really take a very old, the oldest engineered wood product that we know of, glued laminated timber, change the orientation of the process to cross-laminate the timbers and come up with something that is so revolutionary, you know, and something that can really, really help climate mitigation and also the resiliency of our climate, the resiliency of our forests. So one thing that I would like to say that where I see groups like SFI can really increase is the awareness at the consumer level, right? It's happening. It's happening. I can say it is happening because I see that when we get engaged on projects and building owners and developers come to us and ask about sustainability. So it's obvious that their customers are asking them, and you know, and mass timber has a great solution to that story. So what I would like to see happen is have groups like SFI really play a larger role to increase public awareness about all the good things that forests provide us with. And then on a more rapid trajectory is this, what I'm calling climate smart construction. So sustainability in today's built environment in new construction is really a place where mass timber and other wood products can be used more so than ever before. There's a lot of really, really good education work going on today in the architectural, engineering, construction community from outreach organizations like Woodworks in the US and Woodworks in Canada. Obviously, manufacturers like Structurlam also support these kind of demand creation activities for mass timber. But that is also another area that we just have to keep pushing forward. And my ask of the stakeholders is that we move faster. We move faster in both the forestry side and awareness and in construction, because even though forestry and all the products that come from forests are renewable resources, the one thing that is not renewable here is time. And so with that, we need to accelerate our actions on addressing all this carbon sequestration, carbon storage, and all the climate mitigation and resiliency things that we're all working so diligently on.
Yeah, excellent point, Hardy. Thanks so much. We definitely are short on time. If there's anything, that's what it is. So couldn't agree more. Some of our market research that we do at SFI does show an increasing amount of awareness on the consumer end. So we will continue to try to plug along and increase the speed at which that is a reality. So our second question, through certifications, how can healthy working forests bolster the connection between vibrant and healthy ecosystems, buildings, and communities? And Jad, how about if we start with you on this one?
Thanks, Annie. Well, look, I think one of the things we all have to recognize here is that folks are with us. I mean, boy, you know, when we started the Forest Climate Working Group, and I'll talk about that, I hope, before we end here, but, you know, and this idea that forest products were part of Forest for Climate was kind of an edgy idea. And you look now, and all these diverse constituencies inside and outside the forest sector are actually foursquare behind the fundamental principle we're putting forward. And so I think what we just need to offer them is clarity and certainty that we are getting the carbon outcomes that we think that we're getting. And so, you know, to kind of, you know, put a simple term on it, we need forests to frame modeling of the carbon dynamics here, so that what we all know to be true in, you know, the carbon positive outcomes we're creating in our forests through the kind of climate informed forestry that we all spoke about in the first set of responses, all the way to the gains that we're achieving on the construction side, you know, that Hardy was just speaking about. We just need to actually show how all those things connect up. And we need to show those that information at a scale that those different audiences that we've all been talking about, including consumers, can understand and feel excited about and confident in. And so again, I think this is a place where part of it's on all of us in the science and analytics side of this work. We need to do more synthesis of the great analysis that's been done in this space, and so that we kind of connect the story in the right ways. But then again, certification can be this really powerful tool for showing where those outcomes are occurring on the land and kind of linking that to scale in really powerful ways. I think if we get that right, it's kind of all systems go here for this movement.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Thanks so much, Jad. Hardy, why don't I go next with you, please? Hardy, I think you're muted if you are talking.
There we go. There we go.
Awesome.
I'll try to get it right on the next one there, Annie.
You got one more try.
Okay, good. So to me, the beauty of finding good wood is that it's all over North America, and I must say, being here in British Columbia, we're very privileged that our forests are owned by the province. They're all certified, or almost all certified. So we have something like 130 million acres of forest land, and 120 million acres thereabouts are certified. But in North America, there's a total of 1 billion acres of forests. Over half that land is certified as sustainably managed under one of the certification systems, so where SFI features very prominently. And then on top of that, there are a lot of state and provincial laws that also helped with this sustainable or sustainably managed forest concept. So just to put that in perspective, 500 million acres is 5 times the land mass of the total state of California. So that's a lot of trees. And in the land, so what happens with the other 500 million acres? Well, that land that isn't certified may be owned privately or by companies whose businesses depend on maintaining healthy and productive forests. So it's their business, and I can tell you from my background, it's big business. So it's in their best interest to keep these forests thriving. We can get caught up in the discussion on how they do that, and I know these discussions are very active and happening, but really there is, and I think Lauren talked about this, that we live in on a continent that has a tendency to do things right most of the time. So I think we should go with what's positive here. And then, the other thought that I have on this is that proximity, where you source your mass timber, is also an important thought for people that are building with wood or building with mass timber products. So North American mass timber producers, we understand this. So, and that's why you find a lot of these manufacturers located in the Pacific Northwest, in the northeastern part of North America, and also now emerging in the US South. So where, for example, Structurlam is now building our plant in Conway, Arkansas. So the results of sourcing from the continent, it results also in a smaller carbon footprint. And so you don't have oceans to cross. Transporting the products is simpler, faster, and less expensive. If you think of what just happened in the past weeks as another major event on our supply chain, is the big freighter stuck in the Suez Canal, and how that has disrupted supply chains. So, and the other key thing that I think is even more important than the Suez Canal story is that sourcing mass timber from offshore suppliers, you need to think of the transport emissions, and you also need to think about putting the benefits of responsible forestry in our own backyard as opposed to on some other continent. So I think there's a lot to be said under this topic of certifications, Annie, and I think there's a lot to think about it when you think of the whole supply chain.
Excellent. And I'm so glad that you brought up what was on my mind, and I'm sure everybody's, but sourcing from this continent, we don't have to fall into the traps of those ships that do get stuck. So among other benefits as well. Lauren, how about you, please?
So many good points in there from both
Yeah.
Jad and Hardy. Like, what's the best way to respond to some of that? Maybe I'll loop back around to that idea of like regional bioeconomies, which I find very compelling. But kind of start off with one way that I was thinking about this too is really this connection between the ecosystems and then our built environment, is realizing that they are connected. I really like that comment earlier that they're almost, the lines are blurring, or they should be blurring more. A lot of the work we're doing now is undoing a lot of hard infrastructure and not great decisions that were made in the built environment 50 or 80 years ago, and now we're trying to soften waterways and reduce flooding impacts and build and respect the floodplains again, and kind of dealing with the challenges. And it seems like maybe an opportunity that having this tighter relationship with the natural resources around us can be part of this trajectory. So when I think about that, when I can think about both benefits in the urban environment. So we've I can't recall if this was touched on, but there are other benefits outside of climate that are being pointed to with mass timber, like more efficient building times, fewer on-site emissions because of the shorter times, but also not grinding up a bunch of cement for weeks on end. And those on the ground emissions do become very important in densely built urban environments where they already have a lot of challenges with emissions and higher levels of air pollution in those areas. So there's kind of a social equity component with that, and the need for building in these places. And especially when you look at the outlook for building, the need for building and construction globally in the next 50 years, it's a huge source of emissions. It's going to be a big challenge in developing countries. And it just looks like generally relying more on natural resources to do that is going to be beneficial. But even, domestically in North America as well, there are those added benefits. And again, that's the substitution effect of those lower emissions. And then on top of it, you have the embodied carbon in those building materials. But then in the rural environment, there's also benefits. So you're bolstering workforce development in rural communities. You're providing economic incentives to keep working forests as forests. So minimizing incentives for development or conversion of land for other resources, but also encouraging restocking and reforestation. So making that more financially viable option for landowners. And then the other part is we do have a realistic challenge with climate change, that it's going to provide resiliency challenges for our forests, and we may very well need this type of more intensive management to keep our forests healthy. So whether it's purposely migrating species, dealing with invasives, there's the drive to boost the economy in these rural contexts and have the flow of financial investment can result in healthier forests and healthier economies. And a lot of the rural economies have also equity concerns and economic and job concerns. And so that kind of closes around to this idea of this bioeconomy and the excitement in some areas like in Michigan, where we are seeing an uptick in different types of processing plants and facilities. And so the economy and the drive for forest products may be changing, but some of the new options of build more towards building material, and in the state of Michigan, for example, there's not as much like paper production as much. There is still in other places, but there's an increased kind of conversation about the role that development of building materials can have. And then in turn, how do we develop a rural bioeconomy around that? So if we're able to develop those materials here, should we be shipping them across the world, or should we be trying to boost our economy around the lake states and finding the most efficient use of those materials as possible, so they're going into our local towns and cities and into our local building and construction projects?
Absolutely. It's just really a win-win-win all the way around. And I think the more that we learn how to work with nature instead of against it, we can leverage those natural capital benefits that are lie within them, and we can get smarter and improve it for everybody. Last question we have here. Please share with us a specific research project, a building project, or some other effort that you feel advances our knowledge about the connections between managed forests and climate benefits. And Hardy, this time I'm going to start with you. And
Great.
there you go. There you go. You got it.
I got it right.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, at Structurlam, we're seeing many companies like Google, Microsoft, Walmart, you know, real iconic brands start to incorporate mass timber into their real estate portfolios, and they're actually really living their values, and they all have values on being sustainable. And their values, these sustainability values, are very aspirational, and their leadership in finding ways to really focus on mass timber in their built environments is very, very real. That said, we're also seeing many entrepreneurial, market-based developers move in the direction of mass timber. And so at Structurlam, we see many of these advancements of mass timber building systems taking place all across North America and all across the built environment. But in North America, you know, we know that mass timber was really developed in the CLT, I should say, glue laminated timber, which is a big part of the mass timber building system. It really dates back to the mid 1800s. CLT, which is what I think is a derivative of glue laminated timber, came to be in the mid 1990s. And so when North America brought that to our shores, you know, the one lightning rod building of change to me to advance the whole mass timber movement was, and everybody knows about this, the University of British Columbia Brock Commons Tall Wood House, situated in Vancouver. So this is, if you haven't been there, this is an 18-story dormitory built on campus. Urban One Builders was the contractor. Russell Acton from Acton Austria was the architect. And Paul Fast and Fastenep Structural Engineers did all the engineering on that building. And Structurlam, we were able to supply that. And it really set the stage for the building code changes that we have now seen 2020 in Canada, 2021 in the US, these tall wood building code changes that are going to allow us to go up to 18 stories in the US and 12 stories in Canada. So to me, that would be the number one thing that I think has really happened. But if you just back this up a bit further, what was the catalyst to the lightning rod, I guess, would be that what the province of British Columbia has done to support the adoption of mass timber for North American construction practices. And so what was done through many government industry organizations here was that we adapted the European technology to make it work in North America, to make it be the comply with our codes, our fire codes, our acoustic codes, and all these different assemblies for water mitigation strategies, and all these things that come to mind when you want to build with wood. So you think about the Three Little Pigs, you know, you think about blowing your house down, you think about burning your house down, or you think about you know, all these bad things that can happen. But if you engineer and design properly, you can deal with all of that. And in many applications, mass timber is a better way to build than it is with conventional ways. So much of this body of work today now resides at many academic institutions across North America. So in the US, still in Canada here, a lot of deeper studies are being done. And I think it's really, really important that we just continue to, you know, pursue at the science level all these different things that need to happen to, you know, encourage more usage of mass timber.
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Hardy. Appreciate that. Lauren, we'll go back to you.
So a couple of efforts that might be of interest is, and I saw that this just came up in the Q&A, Jad just responded to a question there, that I was going to point to some landscape modeling that my team is doing in collaboration with American Forests and the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. And we're working now with 7 US states to model. It uses an aspatial approach. So it's not actually the maps themselves, but it's keeping track of acreage over time. That's modeling landscape in these states 100 years into the future. And we're working with DNR kind of type decision makers that are hoping to understand different scenarios in terms of their land management approaches, but also it tracks carbon in harvested wood products. And so we can play around with scenarios a little bit on if we were to, have a sustained uptick in materials going to mass timber, what would that look like to the harvested wood product pool over time? And so that's one project that's underway. We actually just had a speaker from Jad's team give a talk in the speaker series in our forestry department just about a week ago. So we're happy to share the link to that if anyone's interested in getting in the weeds a little more, but number of outputs coming out on that as well. So lots of big thinking there of how do decisions we make today shape both the landscape and carbon in harvested wood products. And of course, the sustainability component of that is really crucial, and the certification can play a big role in ensuring that those forests are healthy that are on the landscape. Another project that we have going on in our program is related to this idea of the climate smart forest bioeconomy. So really, defining that. What does this really mean? What does that mean above and beyond or alongside certification? I think one of the big points that we're finding in some analysis that we're doing is that we already have a lot of great best practices that are relevant. We have BMPs, we have certification. We don't want to give the impression that climate planning is going to be completely different from a lot of the other good practices we know have all these other benefits for forests and the landscape. In some cases, climate will present new challenges for forests. In other places, it's keep doing, or how do we get broader adoption of the things that we know are already working. So there can be more nuances, but we know that there's a lot to leverage in the existing certification and well-known sustainability frameworks. But we're using a kind of broader framing of this idea of safeguards. So if we were to have a large uptake or increase the demand of wood, what are the safeguards that we need to have in place for the environment and for society? And so certification is one of the tools to ensure that those safeguards are in place. But not all actors have the same type of certification, and then of course this gets very complicated in international contexts, and so there's a lot to kind of unravel there. But there's a lot of interest in being able to say confidently these are products that we can feel good about. And again, we're lucky where we are located that it's a little easier for us to do that, but there's a lot of interest in the topic area, and we're really working to expand our current understanding and to kind of make some I don't know, not the recommendations, but just to think about what additional metrics would we like to have, if possible, in certification or from governing bodies to continue to move the needle on both sustainability and the climate smart forestry piece.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that's why, we always do iterations and update and take feedback, and we're continually learning and improving. Great thought, Lauren. Jad, thank you.
Okay, well, Annie, I think we're playing in stoppage time, so I'll try to be concise here. Not usually my strength. Let me go for it anyway. So I want to actually call out just two things super briefly. And the first is an innovation is I think we're collaborating better than ever in this space. And my colleagues have given great examples of that. I do want to call it the Forest Climate Working Group. This is a coalition here in the US of more than 70 forest sector organizations across the full diversity of the forest sector. And we've been working together for 14 years on these issues, elevating them, educating policymakers, putting forward solutions, trying to propagate best practices in the field. Lauren serves on the steering committee with me in that group, has been a tremendous leader within the Forest Climate Working Group. SFI has been an anchor partner really from the very beginnings of the Forest Climate Working Group. But it's forest landowners, it's forest products, it's government agencies, NGOs, investors. So anyway, would love if there are folks who are interested in learning more about that and joining us, please do. Because I think a collaboration like that can lift this whole movement in important ways. And then I would just also say on the science side, Lauren gave a great example of the modeling that she described, but I just say I think that's part of the bigger package of how do we push on and quantify all the unknowns and just continue to add to our toolbox of knowledge about what's happening, but then also techniques that we can use. And so just one example is the partnership that our organizations had with SFI and many others around forest soil carbon as this massive component of the carbon outcomes that we're trying to achieve in forests, but that hasn't gotten the attention that the above ground activity and opportunities have gotten. And so we've been working on a forest soil carbon initiative. U.S. Forest Service has been a particularly important partner in that, University of Michigan. And so that collaboration is starting saying, hey, here's like a missing component of the forest for climate equation. Let's go solve for it. And then bring that into that menu of forest practice improvements, refinements that we can all pursue together all across the landscape to get these little incremental gains in carbon acre by acre. And if we keep hunting for those gains and applying them together as a field, we can max out the potential of our forest to help solve some climate change. So just grateful for those kinds of collaborations that are sprouting across our field, and think there's a lot of potential for more.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's such a good point, the collaboration piece. I think as we evolve as humans, I think we're going back to what we realized probably back at the beginning of time is, no, we can't do it alone and we have to collaborate, and that's how we get the best results. So we're definitely a big fan of collaboration as well. That's it for our structured discussion, and I thank you all for your excellent responses and discussion. Jason's going to be helping with some Q&A. I don't know, we're running a little short on time, but actually we're pretty scheduled. We're okay. But Jason, are there any questions that you see coming in that we've missed or that we need to add? Anything that we?
Yeah, so it looks like that that we did receive a few questions, and thank you, Jad and Lauren, for chiming in and answering those. And so if you go into the Q&A and look under the answered section, you'll be able to see some of the responses to those. I do just want to touch on one real quick that Max sent in regarding what SFI is doing in this space specifically through our standards. And as Annie mentioned up front, and as I put in the chat as well, we've been revising our sustainability standards over the last year. And one of the things that we added to our forest management standard is a new standalone climate smart forestry objective. And really what the purpose of this objective is it will require those certified organizations to ensure that their forest management activities address climate change, both from an adaptation as well as mitigation standpoint. And so we're really excited and how we're elevating this within our own standards as well. And hopefully within the next 2 weeks, our board will have officially approved our new forest management standard.
Jason, I also would be happy to hop in
to
respond to one of the other questions as well. Wasn't sure the best way to do that, but we did get a question here about quantifying the carbon benefits in the sequestered wood products, and I just wanted to share that this is actually an emerging and a very fascinating area of a lot of work right now happening. There's a lot of buy-in from the builder community. A lot of companies are working hard with the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, for example, has a current stakeholder engagement process underway to develop a greenhouse gas protocol for wood products, and it's tracking the carbon really past the forest. And it really is it's a challenging area because it's there's a lot of current tracking processes in place for the forest product side of things. It becomes more difficult to track them as they get further down the line into finished goods. And so the amount of carbon there can get trickier to track. There's some, I'm going to drop a link though in the chat. There's something called, I think I'm looking at the right thing. It's the EC3 tool is in development with the University of Washington. And it's looking to track embodied carbon in construction materials and to compare embodied carbon between materials. So that is an emerging effort. There was a series of talks last summer about some of the technical side, and it's getting really into the embodied carbon. So it's like blending the actual weight of carbon storage carbon stored in that product and like LCA work, so life cycle analysis work. So it's pretty intense, but I think we will see a lot of new findings and new guidance on that. But I'll drop the link in the chat right here to take a look at. And again, there's some really nice, webinars on this. But I will say, just as a quick note, which to clarify, if we didn't say this basic definition up front, that There's carbon stored in the wood product itself, and it's generally about 50% of dry weight of any piece of wood you're holding. So if it's like a log you're about to put on a fire and you weigh it, 50% of that is physical carbon. And so you can estimate pretty easily how much carbon is actually in your hands or in a building if you're measuring weight. But it's all of those other emissions that came up periodically. So how far something has traveled, what was the processing intensity for that material, how much fossil fuels are used along the process versus biofuels that change the overall embodied carbon of that product. So maybe a helpful clarification for some others here. But I dropped a link there to learn a little more about that.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Lauren. I appreciate it. And thanks, Jad, and thanks, Hardy. And I think the takeaway from all of your great discussion points is that there's so many benefits beyond just carbon. So we really are focusing on the whole climate smart benefits of what certification can provide to forest management and forest products. So thanks all for joining us. We really appreciate it very much. And thank you attendees for logging in and listening in as well. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yes, awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.